Yeah. So today's workshop, we're looking at facing uncertainty. So we're leaving this on as a recording so everyone can have an access of this. My name is Rosh, as you can see there, Rosh and Vincent, but my name is Rosh and I'm a CBT therapist and EMDR therapist. And with myself, I've got today Rob as well.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm one of the assistant psychologists with the Hub.
And we'd like to say thanks to Emma Greenwood as well. She was very involved in helping us build this workshop. She's moved on to a different placement at the moment, but thank you for Emma for helping us out with this workshop as well. The agenda for today, we're looking at talking about what uncertainty means. We all have different definitions of uncertainty and it can present in so many different ways. So we're looking at what uncertainty means, and then we're looking at uncertainty and worry, how they can be linked. Also to look at breaking that cycle as well. How can we deal with uncertainty better? And also looking at how to build tolerance to uncertainty. This is something that we talk about more in the second half of today's recording. In the second half, we'll be looking at techniques as well. Overall, this recording, we're aiming for around half an hour, but we can look at more techniques in the second half of today to do with dealing with uncertainty. So the main objectives are to understand distress and feeling uncertainty, and also to introduce resources, strategies, and coping skills. So these are the main things that we're looking to cover. Like the distress can be a common part of life. We're surrounded by uncertainty a lot of the times, aren't we? It's about dealing with it and how we can build our tolerance and introducing techniques to help us do that. As you can see there, uncertainty is the psychological state of not knowing. And a classic example of that would be, I guess we've all experienced this recently, haven't we, with COVID? We were surrounded by uncertainty. You know, we didn't know what was going to happen next. When are the vaccines going to be ready? How long are we going to be in lockdown? And all of these thoughts, all of these what ifs can certainly cause uncertainty, can't it? So this is something that comes up quite a lot, like in different situations, because we're surrounded by it. It could be things like the mortgage rates, the interest rates. There's always uncertainty and we're not in control of a lot of those things. And generally speaking, human beings, we like to feel in control, don't we? So this is something that we're looking at today. It's the psychological state of not knowing, but generally speaking, human beings, we're not very good at sitting with uncertainty. We don't like uncertainty. We like to know for sure what is going to happen if we can help it. So that's what we're looking at here, that uncertainty and how it can make us feel. So again, just looking at examples of things that can cause uncertainty. Obviously, it can be financial difficulties. I briefly talked about the interest rates, things like this that are out of our control. That can contribute to the higher levels of uncertainty, being diagnosed with a health condition, because it brings up lots of thoughts and questions, doesn't it? Like, what if, what's going to happen next? How am I going to cope? How am I going to pay my bills? All of these what ifs can build up when we're having these conditions. Caring for a family member, how am I going to cope? How will I find the time? Will my time be enough for that person? All of these thoughts again, what ifs. Starting a new job obviously brings up a lot of new uncertainties. Working in the NHS, especially with the changes that we're undergoing with I guess we've recovered from COVID now, but short staffing. We work with a lot of staff at the Hub, so we hear a lot about short staffing, still dealing with the aftermath of it, trying to find people, like working with agency staff, working longer hours. All of these things can bring about a lot of uncertainty, and again, it's something that causes a lot of anxiety. Becoming a new parent, it's quite self-explanatory. And then taking an exam or a test, we don't know what's going to happen. What are going to be the questions? What if I don't know the answer? What if I get the question that I haven't prepared for? Again, we're surrounded by these what ifs that can lead to uncertainty. And I'm sure you have your own examples of things that would cause you uncertainty. What does uncertainty feel like? So here you can see a list of kind of physical sensations. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can probably have a look at this and see ones that relate to you. Uncertainty, what it does is it can trigger symptoms of fight or flight. because uncertainty leads to worry, as we briefly mentioned at the beginning, because uncertainty leads to worry. So what if something bad is about to happen? So you can see there like dizziness, headache, shaking, heart beating faster, and you can see how this all relates to the fight or flight, because the fight or flight is the evolutionary mechanism that we have, which is designed to keep us safe, isn't it? So these symptoms are triggered when we feel uncertainty, and it can lead to emotions like anxiety, concern, panic, sadness, and other symptoms as well. A lot of the time we can experience other emotions based on our actions, and we can respond to uncertainty in the short term. So a lot of the times we can try to reduce the uncertainty by checking. So for example, if my fear is that I'm going to miss my train, I'm not going to make it to my train station in time, I might spend a lot of time checking the train times. Has it been cancelled? Once or twice, generally speaking, can be okay, can't it? Because that's a healthy amount. But if I'm checking 10, 20 times because I'm worried about that, what if I miss my train? It might feel like too much. It might be excessive. So these things are definitely things that we want to look at, because in the short term, we can rely on certain behaviors which reduce the uncertainty, but then does it keep it going in the long term? That is the question. And how can I build a tolerance to this uncertainty in the long term as well?
So the what ifs are the kind of things that occur in our daily lives. We all have those thoughts. What if I lose my job? What if I get ill? What if I can't cope? And these are all worries that are kind of ingrained within uncertainty, because we don't know what's going to happen. Usually we like things to be predictable and certain, which makes us feel safer. However, we know that the world's not as predictable, and certainty isn't guaranteed within our lives. And those kind of what if thoughts are our brain's way of trying to help us cope, help us prepare for the future and predict what's going to happen. And it can be tricky to be certain about what's going to happen in the future. However, if we think we know what's going to happen, it kind of makes us feel a little bit sense of relief, feel safer. You can kind of think, how many times have you predicted something that didn't happen? We buy a lottery ticket in the hopes that we've won the lottery, but it doesn't always work out that way. So it's these feelings and these worries that can lead behaviours to try and reduce anxiety and uncertainty. And however, these may be effective in the short term, but in the long term, they just help maintain that anxiety and that uncertainty. As Rosh was saying before, there's the example of checking the trains. We check them, it gives us that sense of relief, but in the long term, it doesn't help. And this can have a significant impact on our lives and our day-to-day functioning, as well as for the people around us. So if we think of uncertainty, we can think of it about a phobia of those kind of what-if thoughts. We develop that fear of what if questions. We acknowledge them or try not to think about them, but when they come up, they can scare us. It's a lot like having a phobia of spiders. It's that idea that we see a spider, we get scared. It's kind of an automatic reaction. And that's what happens with those kind of what if thoughts. It's kind of pulls us into a rabbit hole. So it's a good way of trying to understand uncertainty and thinking about it as that kind of phobia of those what if questions.
Here you can see the uncertainty formulation. So we use this quite a lot when we're working with anxiety and GAD, which stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder, which is one of the most common presentations, especially when we're working with primary care staff and NHS workers, especially due to work-related stress. It's something that comes up quite commonly. So you can see here, when we're looking at the cycle of uncertainty and anxiety, you can see at the top is the situation. So let's say let's use an example situation. Let's say, what if the work situation is busy today? So we've got a shift on tonight. It's a night shift, and my worry is, what if I can't cope? What if there's too much work and it's going to get too much for me? So that's the what if worry, isn't it? What if it's too much and I can't cope? And that obviously leads to worry. The what if is leading us to worry, and the worry is going to cause physical sensations of anxiety. So the most common ones are things like heart rate increasing, feeling tense, feeling breathless a lot of the times. Those physical sensations, especially if you're feeling it for a long period of time, how are you going to feel after that? Demoralized and exhausted, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to feel even more tired going into that shift because of the anxiety around the anticipation of what the shift is going to be like. We're going to feel even more tired, which then feeds into the tiredness, especially if the shift works out to be a tough one. So that maintains a lot of the time the exhaustion feelings, especially if we're feeling triggered and anxious throughout the day. And as you can see on the right, you can see all of this cycle is maintained by intolerance of uncertainty. As Rob was saying before, it can be described as a phobia of the what if, because what we're looking to do is try to avoid the what if. But if I want to avoid the what if, so let's say if I'm trying to avoid the what if of what if I have a terrible shift, what might I do to try and reduce that uncertainty? I can do a lot of it might be uncertain still, but there might be a few things I can check. I might be able to check who I'm on shift with, where am I working. I can check with one of my colleagues, what was it like last night? Who is the board's busy? What's it going to look like? So I can try and check on these things, or maybe I can check my emails. It depends on, everyone has different work situations, but you get the point. There might be ways to check, but then is that really helping me if I do? It's probably helping me, reduce the anxiety because I think I know what I'm walking into. But at the end of the day, especially if we work in an environment where we work with people and we work in a busy clinical environment, a lot of things remain unpredictable, don't they? So in the short term, me checking those things might make me feel a bit safer, but it's also maintaining my intolerance of uncertainty. So it's again trying to find that balance by checking or trying to reduce my what if. Is my intolerance of uncertainty getting worse? So what we want is to try and build a tolerance to uncertainty by sitting with the anxiety almost that might cause, because we want to build more of a immunity to it. Because if we're describing uncertainty as a phobia to what if, what we want to do is expose ourselves to the what if, isn't it? So that's something to think about, and that's another way again to help us think about uncertainty. So you can see here, uncertain situation, we're surrounded by them, right? So let's say there's an uncertain situation where I'm not feeling, so let's use a work scenario again. So I'm not feeling like I'm doing a good job. And I'm worrying if I'm falling behind, I'm not doing a good job. The urge for me is going to be to seek certainty. How am I going to do that? I'm probably going to seek reassurance. So I might ask one of my colleagues or my managers, or like even my partner. Like I might ask my partner, do you think I'm doing okay? Do you think I'm coping? Am I doing a good job? I might ask my colleagues, are you sure I'm doing a good job? And most of the time, our colleagues are going to be like, yeah, you are. Of course you are. And they might agree with us that we are doing a good job, but we still struggle to believe in it. So in the short term, again, that uncertain situation, we've managed to neutralize the anxiety by seeking reassurance, haven't we? So that takes away the anxiety. So my colleagues have told me that I'm doing an okay job, I'm doing a good job. That's taken away the anxiety. But then, is that anxiety going to come back? More often than not, it does, right? That's certainly something that we've noticed when working with people, and probably from personal experience too. Like seeking reassurance works, but then it means that we're going to have to do it repetitively. The next day I'm on shift, I'm going to have the same urge to seek the reassurance again. So it's a short-term relief, as we were talking about before, but it's not a permanent fix at all to help us deal with that uncertain situation. On the other hand, you can see at the top, the other option is to increase tolerance to the uncertainty. how can we do this? So if we're getting the urge to seek reassurance in that moment, and if we're feeling doubts around what we're doing, and especially if we've received a lot of reassurance in the past, so say every time I've seek reassurance, people are giving me feedback saying I've done a good job, I can try to sit with the uncertainty that maybe I haven't done things perfectly. Maybe, it's not gone as well as I wanted to, but still sit with the uncertainty rather than seeking reassurance. So what this is going to do is it's going to trigger higher levels of anxiety, because I'm sitting with the uncertainty, aren't I, that maybe I haven't done a perfect job. But then over time, it's going to help me desensitize to that fear and the anxiety as well. And what do you think is likely to happen over a longer period of time? Over time, our urge to seek the reassurance is likely to decrease, because we have built up more of a tolerance to the uncertainty. So this is, again, a good way of looking at it, because generally speaking, we're not built for dealing with uncertain situations. And that's when the fight or flight response, as we talked about before, is triggered. But we can build more of a tolerance to uncertain situations by using this kind of method. We'll talk about like a structured way to help you do this and build more of a tolerance to uncertainty later on today as well. So there's lots of different ways we might respond to uncertainty. The most common one is, avoidance. So if I've got a task or project to complete, and I'm worrying about, am I going to complete it on time? A lot of the time we engage in procrastination because we want to avoid doing that task, because that's going to cause us anxiety, isn't it? And worry, what if I don't get this done on time? What if I don't get it done to the standard that I wanted to? So procrastination can be common when it comes to anxiety and uncertainty. Escaping from uncertain situations, because social situations, generally speaking, a lot of the times we don't know what we're walking into. Sometimes we do, because we might spend time with family, friends, and familiar people as well. But if it's a new situation, that's going to cause us anxiety. What if I don't enjoy it? What if I don't have a nice time? What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm boring? So these kind of thoughts can again lead to the avoidance that we're talking about here. And changing the topic of conversation away from that which creates uncertainty. So this can be things like, let's use COVID as an example, right? Let's, again, and I know it's behind us mostly now, but like if someone's talking about COVID, what's going to happen next and all of these things, that we can have this sort of urge to redirect the conversation, because thinking about it is bringing up, again, too many what ifs. And because we have a phobia to the what if, we want to try and avoid thinking about that situation, which is surrounded by uncertainty. On the other hand, we can over-engage as well. So this is basically to do with over-preparation. So say if we've got like a presentation or something that needs to be submitted at work or a talk, we can engage in excessive preparation for these talks. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you think of it as a good thing, I'm being very prepared, and it is. There's nothing wrong with being really prepared, but excessive is subjective. Again, I guess sometimes people might feel like I'm preparing, I'm spending so much time on this, and maybe it's too much. So that's something to think about. If we're doing excessive preparation, when you think about it, what we're really doing is increasing certainty. So again, something to think about. This is something that's helping us reduce the anxiety in the short term, but is it really helping us build more of a tolerance? We've already talked about the next one, excessively seeking reassurance. We've talked about that one already, haven't we? And again, this can be a short-term relief, but in the long term, it can maintain the anxiety, because we're going to need to seek more and more reassurance. Planning unnecessarily. Yeah, that can be another one that can come up commonly as well. A person that chooses the first thing that they see. So another thing that comes up is impulsive behaviors. Because we have these anxieties and we worry about how we're going to deal with things, sometimes we make snap decisions and almost get things done with, because I don't want to think about it too much. This is going to cause me too much anxiety. But again, to a certain extent, what I'm trying to do there is get rid of the anxiety and make a snap decision. I'm not really thinking it through maybe as much as I should do. Therefore, the decision that I'm making in that situation might be not as rational as it could be. So again, something else to think about. Sometimes we make these impulsive decisions to avoid the uncertainty because we don't want to sit with that unknown for too long.
So being intolerant to uncertainty is a lot like having an allergy, really. So if you're allergic to pollen, for example, you'll sneeze, you'll cough, your eyes might get red and teary, even when you're exposed to just a small amount of pollen. And when people who are intolerant of uncertainty are exposed to just even a little bit of uncertainty, they have a strong reaction. They worry, they do things that can kind of get them away from it or avoid it or kind of eliminate that uncertainty, like Rosh was talking about in the previous slide. But being very intolerant of uncertainty can cause problems. It leads to a lot of time-consuming and tiring behaviours. It can cause stress, anxiety, and kind of is the major fuel for our worries. But even if you agree that being more tolerant of uncertainty would be helpful, it's not an easy thing to change your attitude. However, we know that our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are all interconnected, and that if you can change one, ultimately you can change the others. So the best way to learn to become more tolerant of uncertainty is to start acting as if you are tolerant of uncertainty, exposing yourself to small amounts of uncertainty and changing your behaviour around uncertainty. And that will eventually help you change your thoughts, your feelings around uncertainty as well. Another way of thinking about it is to think about we're looking through uncertainty glasses. Most people have heard of looking through the world through rose-tinted spectacles, and when we think everything looks a little bit better than it is. Same kind of principle with uncertainty glasses. If we're looking at the world through uncertainty glasses, we're more likely to see it. So, for example, people might have the worry, what if I miss an email? So they're constantly refreshing, checking 20 times a day. This is because they're more tuned into that, waiting for something to go wrong. They're looking for it. And like we said before, each time we check the email, we're kind of reinforcing that belief that, something might go wrong if I don't check. So to stop wearing those uncertainty glasses, we need to practice exposure to uncertainty so that we can realise that it's safe not to look at the emails excessively. We can check them once or twice a day. Nothing bad's going to happen if we do miss something.
So if we're looking at the world wearing these uncertainty spectacles, which can happen, can't it? Because like Rob was saying, sometimes we can view the world in a positive light, but on the other hand, we can start to see all the things that might go wrong. Because a lot of the times when people are experiencing symptoms of generalized anxiety, they say they have this fear that something is about to go wrong. What if something bad is around the corner? So these fears are there, isn't it? And like Rob was saying, what we need to do is expose ourselves to that uncertainty. And here you can see on the slide, experimenting with uncertainty, right? So you can see this is a technique that we use quite commonly when we're working with uncertainty, because the main thing that we're looking to do is build tolerance to uncertainty. And the main way we can do this is by experimenting. Like Rob said in the previous slide, the emails things. So if we're checking it 20 times a day, chances are this is excessive, right? So we're checking it too many times. So you can see here, it's a very similar example that we're using for this one. You can see here that this person, instead of checking it 20 times a day, they're checking the email only twice per day. That's their goal. So you can imagine the level of anxiety and discomfort that might be caused for this person by checking it only twice, because especially if we're used to checking it 20 times a day. So the discomfort is, I feel terrible when I can't check my email. I'm feeling feverish and nervous. I want to check my email right now. And what's checking the email right now going to do? That's going to take away the anxiety, isn't it? Because if I check it, I know that I'm not going to miss anything important. So the thoughts for this person while they're doing the behavior is, I'm going to miss something important. People will think I am not good at my job. So the fear is there, isn't it? Like that the person is going to miss something important. So obviously what they've done in this case is try to reduce it down to twice per day. And they're having these thoughts, I'm going to miss something important and people are going to think that I'm not good at my job. Afterwards, though, they did this for a few days. You can see the observations after performing the action. The first day was difficult. However, after a few days, I realized that it was getting easier and nothing bad happened. So this is an example, of course, but this is something that we commonly see when we're working. And this is a research and evidence-based technique. If we look at NICE guidelines and the protocol for the anxiety treatment, this is actually the biggest part of it that people tend to find the most useful, building tolerance to uncertainty. And a lot of it is terminology, isn't it? Because when we look at uncertainty, it's more of a blanket term, I think, which can cover so many things. Like if you look at OCD, a lot of the time with OCD, what's involved is the checking behaviors. And why do we check? If we're checking excessively, like the emails, for example, so say if it's something else, like the door or the stove or something like this, something that we fear, if we don't check enough times, something bad is going to happen, something catastrophic is going to happen. So each time we check, you can notice in our body that our level of anxiety comes down. You can probably relate with that. So each time we're checking, the level of anxiety comes down, but that means we're going to have to keep checking. And like Rob was saying before, it keeps reinforcing the checking, doesn't it? Because each time you check it, you're feeling good because it's a relief, because you can be sure that the door is locked, or you can be sure that you haven't missed an important email. But then we're going to have to keep checking. So this is giving that person and giving you an opportunity to build more of a tolerance by reducing the number of times we check and reducing the number of times we're increasing certainty to help us build, again, more of a tolerance. And we definitely encourage you, if you're watching this recording online, we definitely encourage you to try this with a couple of things, maybe a couple of things that you're feeling that you're checking too much, because that might be the easier one to start off with. Things that you're perhaps checking more you feel more than you should. This is something that you can try as an experiment, and it's a very effective one, like we say as well.
So distress tolerance is kind of our ability to manage actual or perceived emotional distress. And it also involves being able to make it through an emotional incident without making it worse. People who have low distress tolerance, it's a mouthful, that one, tend to become easily overwhelmed by stressful situations and may sometimes turn to kind of unhealthy or self-destructive ways of coping. Although you can't control the occurrence of unexpected situations, you can control how you respond. And that can make all the difference to how you feel and how you deal with those distressing issues. So one of the techniques that we use is a technique called STOP. And I'll just talk you through what that means. So when we experience one of these situations, the first thing we do is stop, take a step back. Don't act immediately, just take a pause. Then you take a breath. Just notice your breath as you breathe in and breathe out. And just take a moment to observe. What am I thinking and feeling? What are the words that my mind is saying? Kind of evaluating, is that a fact? Is it just your brain's opinion? Are the descriptions or evaluations? Is it accurate? Is it inaccurate? Do you find what it's saying helpful or unhelpful? Just really taking a moment just to observe the situation. And then we pull back and put into perspective. So we see the situation as an outside observer. What would a fly on the wall see? Is there another way of looking at this situation? What might someone else see and make of it? Or a good one is to try and think of advice you would give to someone else. So your friends come to you with this situation, what would you say to them? And then we practice what works. So do what works, what's most helpful for you. Kind of playing in with your principles and your values. What will be effective or appropriate? Is the action proportional to the event? Is it in keeping with my values and my principles? and maybe thinking about what the consequences of your actions will be. So yeah, that's the kind of stop technique that can help us in those situations.
So yeah, we've come towards the end of the workshop, the recording workshop today. So today what we covered was the uncertainty and techniques to help you manage and build more of a tolerance to uncertainty. We certainly hope you found it useful, and thank you so much for listening to the recording. Keep an eye out, because we are hoping to add more resources that relate to this workshop on the drive where you're accessing this video as well. So that is something that we're still planning to do. And again, thank you for listening.